All right, I have 4 o'clock. I always congratulate folks at this time of day for making it this far and hanging in there with us for 4 o'clock session. Thank you so much. I'm Heather Staines. I'm a senior strategy consultant at Delta Think. I'm one of the conference directors, and I'm excited to present to you today a relatively unique session called "The Privacy Librarian is In," and we got to hand it to our speakers for being willing to play along. I'll tell you in just a moment why we are organized the way we are. I would like to say that we invite a lively discussion, but please adhere to the Charleston Code of Conduct, which I guess there's details on the conference page, something we should all review for next year. So I'm just going to briefly introduce our speakers, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the format for the session. In the front row, you can put your hand up if we have Keandra Bailey. Keandra is Assistant Standards Program Manager for NISO, which is a brand new role, and she is brand new to the role, so double brand new. Keandra has an MLS with a concentration in digital libraries, and she went to North Carolina Central University, and she has the broad experience of working at both academic libraries and publishers. Most recently, she was at Duke University Press, where she was the digital access specialist. So she worked with the technical teams to troubleshoot a wide range of complex electronic resource issues around access and authentication, and you will see why we're thrilled to have her participate in our session today. Next to Keandra, we have Tim Lloyd. Tim is founder and CEO of LibLinks, a company which provides identity, access, and analytics solutions for publishers and libraries. His career spans several decades in a variety of product development and operational roles in online publishing, with a particular focus on developing innovative products and services to support online learning and research. Tim is a member of the governance committee of seamlessaccess.org and co-chair of the outreach committee, and also a member of the Project Counter working group on OA unpaywalled reporting. And joining me on stage to my immediate left here is John Feltz. John is currently head of information technology and collections at Coastal Carolina University. He's worked in academic library technology for more than 30 years and is a former patent holder and co-founder of Journal Finder, the first open URL resolver and knowledge base to go into production in the US. Throughout his career, John has focused on identifying and implementing innovative issues of technology in the provision of library services, online user privacy protection, and improving the user experience for accessing online resources. He is also an active member of the Coalition for Seamless Access. And to John's left, we have Wilhelmina Ranke. Wilhelmina is head of libraries, systems, and technologies at Georgia Southern University. Her department manages in-building technologies and back-end systems in support of the university libraries located in Statesboro, Savannah, and Hinesville, Georgia. She holds a JD and an MLIS from Florida State University. So a little bit about our session today, The Privacy Librarian is In. It was inspired by the Peanuts cartoon where Lucy would set up her stand and offer probably various range of dubious advice for 5 cents. With inflation, I'm sure that would be much, much more today. So we're going to act out a little play for you to highlight some of the issues around privacy, and we have some volunteers from some of our speakers, and then we also have some volunteers from the audience who have agreed to help us. So I'm going to set up each one of the issues. We'll go through the plays, and then we will go back to the issue on slides and talk about what are the key points that were brought out through the skit, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions about those individual issues at that time. So we will start with our issue number 1, complex authentication. So who is playing the questioner for issue number 1? Okay. Issue number 1. This is the reference desk. A new student is searching sensitive topics and wants to know what information is stored about them. And I should say, John is playing the privacy librarian and Wilhelmina is playing the trainee. So on your mark, new student, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm a new student. I'm doing some very sensitive searches around ultra-high energy cosmic rays. Is any information about those searches stored anywhere?
Oh, it's not on, John.
Check. That depends. If it's open access content, then you can access it anonymously. Unless you access via an account you created to personalize your experience. If you log in using a personal email, then your activity will probably be associated with your login. Now, if you log in using your student network credentials, then it depends. Again, we anonymize your identity to access some of our databases, however, not all of them.
Wow, that's even more complex than ultra-high energy cosmic rays. How do I tell which database is able to track me and which one isn't?
Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. Maybe you could come back and ask me again in a few months.
Crikey, I thought libraries protected our privacy, but at least our contracts with the database vendors can prevent this.
Well, actually, not really. Many of our contracts use really old language that predate modern browser tracking tools and single sign-on technologies, so they don't have anything to say about this. We've had a few internal meetings about trying to improve things, but it's really slow and time-consuming to change contracts, and none of us are lawyers.
Well, I have a friend who obsessively watches Law and Order. Maybe he can help with this.
We missed Wilhelmina's crikey, which is one of my favorite lines. I think you should say it again.
Crikey.
Fantastic. Issue number 2, website tracking. Here comes our concerned student who has just heard that the college websites use Google Analytics. Is that on? Oh. Check? Yes.
There we go. Hi. I heard that Google has tracking code on all of these websites all over and follows what I do online and then sells ads. What's that all about?
Yeah, well, see, we have Google Analytics on the library website. It lets us see how many times each page gets looked at, and it's super easy to use.
Is that letting Google track me around the web and then on your site?
Yes, but we also get statistics about our website.
So that's a little creepy. Why are we sending out information to Google?
Well, see, our university provides the same website software to every department, and it comes with Google Analytics baked in. The university marketing office sets it up on every campus page and tracks which pages are the most popular across the whole campus. Every department on campus gets the websites through main campus, and we have to use the campus software and tools the same as everyone else.
So who sets this up?
Main campus. They set up Google Analytics on all of the university websites.
That's messed up.
Thank you. Who has issue number 3? Browser security. A frustrated student is unable to access library resources from their new iPad.
So I checked out this brand new iPad that you provided, and I click on the same links that I always click on. But now I can't log in to use the journal articles for my research. I don't have time for this. What are you going to do to fix it?
Well, Professor Jones, as I've told you, unfortunately, this is a much broader issue than anything the library or the university has control over. Browser vendors, particularly Apple, are implementing changes to their browsers and the engine behind them that bolsters privacy but has the unintended consequence of disrupting authentication, which is what you're experiencing.
So you're telling me I need to call Apple?
No. We recommend that you use a Windows machine to avoid this problem.
Seriously? So Big Tech's attempt to improve privacy is breaking authentication?
Potentially. Apple is planning on anonymizing IP addresses and user data stored in browser local storage so that they cannot be shared across platforms by various advertisers. Unfortunately, this is the same information used in federated and IP-based access.
Can anything be done?
Well, there is a new community group in the World Wide Web Consortium and is meeting to consider this challenge in depth and to identify solutions. And as well, Seamless Access is monitoring these developments closely and is seeking to provide a vehicle to engage in these issues. So please stay tuned.
And I apologize for demoting Professor Jones to a student in that scenario. So, Keandra's method actress, so we all need to be careful. Issue number 4, campus surveillance. In this case, and I hope it is a student, A concern, they're all concerned. It's good that they're showing concern. A concerned student has spotted security cameras monitoring everyone going in and out of the library.
Hi. So I noticed that there's one of those shaded security cameras at the entrance of the library. Are you recording us going in and out?
No, we're not. Those aren't cameras, but they are tracking the RFID tags embedded in the passes you use to access the library. It means we don't have to stop and check your pass, but can do it silently. It also allows us to spend more time on our library work.
So I see those cameras, trackers, all over campus. Is the campus tracking everywhere we go?
Honestly, I don't really know. We were just told they would make it easier to access the library.
I read an article about those things. There was a university in Arizona that was using them to track how students interacted with each other. It seems a little creepy to me.
Oh, yeah. I read that too. They were using it to successfully predict which students were at risk of not returning after their first year so that they could proactively offer help.
That sounds like a worthy cause, but there was another college that used that kind of information to get rid of students. The president told concerned faculty, "This is hard for you because you think of the students as cuddly bunnies, but you can't. You just have to drown the bunnies."
And you know what happened to him? He got canned. True
I
story.
was shocked to learn that that's actually a true story, and I made them cut the part about putting the Glock to the student's head, which is even more disturbing.
Bunnies.
To the bunny's head, sorry. Students were bunnies in that scenario, as frightening as that is. Issue number 5, data privacy. Move the slide. Okay, not concerned, confused. A confused freshman wants to save time. Oh, we have by reusing his. That's a fail on our part, pronoun fail on our part. Credentials, we didn't know who was playing the part. We should have planned for that. For each publisher website.
Hi, I'm a freshman, and my professor is making us find 5 scholarly journal articles for class. But I'm also supposed to create an account on these sites so I can save these articles for later, but each website is different. Can't I just use the same username and password for each of these?
Yeah, you could, but it's typically a bad idea to use the same username and password combination across different sites, because if one site's security is compromised, then all of your accounts will be vulnerable. Also consider that for every account you create, the site requires that you share personal information about yourself, such as your name, email address, university affiliation, and the like. The library has no authority over what one of these vendor sites does with your information.
So one of these vendors could do something I don't want with my personal information, like share it or sell it?
Potentially. We have no control over that. It varies from site to site, so always be thoughtful about where you create accounts and the types of information you share about yourself.
Okay, thanks, dude.
I had no idea this was so complicated, or that someone's information could potentially become a commodity. What can we do about this?
It is that complicated, unfortunately. We have a unique license agreement with every vendor, but many times privacy principles are not spelled out and therefore cannot be legally enforced. We need to be more thoughtful about user and data privacy in all of our contracts and what options we have to enforce future compliance.
What about IP access versus federated access? I read that user privacy is impacted in different ways by those.
It is indeed. When a user creates a user account via IP access, the library has no ability to intervene on the user's behalf. But with federated access, user identity is baked into the authentication and authorization process when first logging into the vendor's platform. And scene, this gets somewhat complicated, so we're going to break out of the
Skit.
Thank you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this topic, just a little bit more, and then
So welcome,
we'll proceed as a panel.
Keandra and Tim to come up to the stage. So we're now going to go back through the different issues, in this case in reverse order, starting with data privacy. We'll take questions on each one. We'll get through as many as we can. So I'm going to hand over to John.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll proceed as a panel. So we'll now go back through the different issues, in this case in reverse order, starting with data privacy. Thank you. Hey, everybody. So as I said in our wonderful skit, when a user creates an account on a vendor's platform, when using IP access, the library really has no ability to intervene on the user's behalf. They log into a resource via their proxy server that's probably integrated with an LDAP or Azure directory or whatever the flavor is. Then off they go to any number of vendor platforms to create accounts. The library or the library's organization has no ability to protect a user's privacy or intervene in any way. However, with federated access, user identity is baked into the authentication and authorization process when first logging into the vendor's platform. This pertains to the entity categories for use in the configuration of federated authentication systems that outline which attributes about the user are passed from a subscribing organization to the service provider or the vendor. There are 2 new categories that were approved by ReFeds early this year, which gives libraries and vendors the technical specifications needed to manage the sharing of user information and protect user privacy. The first one is the anonymous authorization entity category, and that passes no personally identifiable information about a user. It only authorizes access to a resource, and that's it, nothing more. And then there's the pseudonymous authorization entity category, and this also grants access, but also passes a pseudonymous identifier that obfuscates user identity, but still allows personalization services that benefit the user. Also consider that because technical solutions are many times not enough, Seamless Access has spun up a contract language working group to help libraries address the lack of useful contract language found in many, if not most of our contracts, because so many of these contracts predate modern technologies and have very little useful information about browser behavior and single sign-on technologies writ large. So this group is developing a toolkit for use in contracts between libraries and vendors for developing model language that can be used to update contracts and documentation to help libraries choose the appropriate entity categories and be more proactive in protecting user privacy.
Does the panel want to add anything to that, what John mentioned?
How many of you here are using federated authentication for library resources? Do you mind putting your hands up? So, what's that? Maybe a third. Me and all will be librarians, so maybe it's half. How many of those are aware of what attributes are being sent to which databases and feel like their library has that under their control? Put your hand up. Right, that's the point. The big issue here is that federated authentication is a tool, but it's a tool that you have to manage. You have control of it as an institution, as a library, possibly. But the attributes that are sent when someone authenticates can pass data about users. And if you're not aware of that or are configuring it as a library, it might inadvertently pass data which you don't want. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm going to make this pretty brief, but where federated authentication began was as a means of helping researchers collaborate. And it was originally implemented on campuses, not within libraries. And when researchers collaborate, they tend to want to share data. So they're sharing names and email addresses. And so what can often happen is that when that same method is applied to library resources, unless you're paying attention, the same sort of data attributes are being shared. So this is an area where if your library is using federated authentication, find out what are the configuration settings being used and are they appropriate to the databases you've got. And the standards that John referred to, which are coming down, which have been approved but still have to be taken up and adopted by us as an industry, allow you to make much more discrete control over things. And they also map to very common scenarios, like I've got a database where I need to share an email address because it's got continuing learning credits, or I've got a database where no one needs to know anyone. It's just for searching for content and that's it. And so these categories allow you to sort of bake templates you can apply in different scenarios. If you want more information about this, go to seamlessaccess.org or approach us afterwards. I can talk all afternoon about that one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Tim. Do we want to field questions on this particular topic now, or do you just want to wait till the end and...
Wait, you want to wait till the end? Okay. We'll wait till the end for questions.
Okay, Next up. That's going to be whoever's issue number 4. We have extensively rehearsed our flow and our stage production up here, and
Might have focused more on the acting bit.
So campus surveillance is one of the issues for privacy in academic libraries. We'd alluded to that with the RFID trackers on campus. We have to have security gates on libraries, sometimes for security reasons. I had previously worked at FSU around when the time when they put the swipes in there, and that was because of a security incident. Then there are also things like a lot of times tools are selected by main campus, they're managed by main campus IT, they're managed by outside groups, and privacy is not really an issue, and many areas are not open to the public in the same way. So surveillance can be both beneficial and potentially harmful, like a swipey card access or tracking people around. You can solve crimes that way. There have been where you can tell where somebody's gone and you might want to piece something together afterwards. You can also control access to a building by requiring a card swipe, and that is a physical security measure. But it's potentially harmful because the information's being collected and it could be used for other things too. Anyway, clear policies are needed to understand and mitigate impacts on library users. So for example, if you have a federal depository program or something like that where the public's coming in, mitigating those impacts or making it where things like privacy and the American Library Association Bill of Rights is actually valued and kept alive.
I think the only other comment I'd say is that, one of the big takeaways here is that just because campus mandates things doesn't mean it's not worth checking how that applies in a library. Being aware, you may not be able to change what's being done, but at least you can be aware of it. And so you can answer questions from students. So, in the skit we had here, the student was asking, what's happening around the rest of campus? Well, we didn't know as the library. All we were told was that, this would help us check people out and make more efficient library use. Well, a more useful answer would have been to explain actually how that data was being used. It may not be that the library knows it, but you could ask. So, what we're trying to do here is just highlight awareness of other things that fall down to the library from campus policies, but impact library users, and being aware of how it impacts them. In some cases, you may be able to advocate for change, but at least you can inform.
So I'm going to talk a bit about
You need one of those clickers.
All right. So I'm going to talk about browser changes how browser changes affect some of the thing comes into the picture of this. So a bit of background about how I ended up here sitting on this stage right here. So in June at NASIG, Tim and John gave a presentation on seamless access, and Tim asked the audience if anyone had seen remote access breaking because of a browser issue, as opposed to any sort of IP or actual federated authentication issue. And I had just that past month. So this was a small institution in the UK, and at Duke University Press, we rolled out a program called the Scholarly Publishing Collective. Now, what this required was us ingesting a ton of data about institutions that were both new and previously known to us. This institution only had one subscription, and they were using this particular subscription directly for one class. The whole class was based around this journal. So they wanted to use a referring URL to direct the journal via their Moodle account. When you go to Duke University Press's Read platform, powered by Silverchair, when you click the PDF link to open the journal to print out articles, a redirect occurs. This caused the connection to break. And one of the ways that the IT person was troubleshooting was using a mobile phone and connecting via that mobile phone as a hotspot. He tried it on 2 different phones. One, it connected via the network. So at the end of the day, we just chalked it up to a network problem. But as I thought more about it, and as I was sitting in this session, I realized that he was using Google Chrome. Now, Google Chrome by default in incognito mode blocks third-party cookies. But you also can block third-party cookies in a regular session. When that redirect happened, Google Chrome treated it as if it was a pop-up or some type of tracker and broke the connection. And so he couldn't get access. And when he switched devices, he switched to a different browser. And thus it worked. So in summary, one of the things we asked for was, when we were troubleshooting issues, was confirm your IP ranges, in any authentication methods, a screenshot of the error you are receiving, and we need to know what IP you're accessing from. That's not really enough anymore. It's to the point now where we have to actually ask for browser settings in order to truly understand what could actually be going on as we begin troubleshooting on the publisher side. So.
Thank you. Anybody want to add? Tim?
So this is an emerging problem. Not a lot of people are encountering it overtly. I suspect it's happening, but people are just chalking it down to user problems. At LibLinks, we've seen a few examples of this, either with browser cookies stopping authentication or with Mac devices. The example we used in the script was an Apple device, because we know that Apple has this policy called private relay, which will anonymize your IP address and break IP authentication. There are sort of 3 taglines for what you can do as a library here, and they're up on the slide. Prepare, inform, advocate. So the prepare part is start understanding this area. There's a really good FAQ on the seamlessaccess.org website. We can provide you with a link afterwards, or you can go and find it yourself. It's pretty easy to find. That was prepared by our outreach committee. John and myself are both on that outreach committee. It was largely done by librarians, for librarians, and it helps you by describing what sort of things are changing and how they might start breaking authentication. So take a look at that. The second part's inform. Start letting people know, starting within the library, but thinking about what your policy is towards letting the broader institution, maybe faculty, maybe users, be aware that things may start breaking, and they are beyond the library's control, they're beyond your institution's control, they're changing because of things that are happening well outside of our industry. And the last one is advocate. We are a small industry, but we can speak with a united voice, and there are organizations that are starting to engage with the big browser makers or with W3C to advocate on our behalf, to basically let these very big organizations know that the changes they're making to protect privacy are also actually breaking what works in our industry. And again, there's more information on the seamlessaccess.org site. And I'm sorry, there isn't a clearer answer here. It's really, we have to be aware of the wave that's going to come and prepare for it. Thank you.
I feel like we're in that moment, like GDPR was hitting and all the data privacy people were like, GDPR is coming, and your organization, unless it was a big organization, was like, well, we don't know what we should even do. So like we're in that moment now where the wave is kind of coming and things are going to start to happen. So as Tim said, just being aware of what we're experiencing is the first step. Website tracking. Who's talking about this?
I can talk about website tracking.
Okay.
So website tracking, there's 2 things going on, right? There's always pressure to show your value and to get statistics. And in order to get statistics, you have to monitor something about people. How much you get, maybe that's up for question, but you do have to measure users' behavior to get numerical statistics. The other thing that's going on is there's pressure from external entities to provide the statistical tools. So the skit talked about Google Analytics. Google Analytics is almost ubiquitous on the internet. If you were just to go and check, is the Google Analytics tracking code on websites? It's on more than half of US websites. They can follow someone from website to website to website. I am also on a campus where the campus provides the software to each college. The library is a college on campus. And we get the campus web platform. We could not go to our own platform if we wanted to. All the campus websites look the same. They all act the same. The communications department pulls comparative statistics across departments and provides a unified theme and look. And along with that, the campus installed Google Analytics and didn't turn off where it sends IP addresses back to Google. So this is an area where, first off, there's that pressure for statistics, and tools that are easy to use are someone else's plug-and-play tool sending data back to them. So Google Analytics sending data back to Google, and it's really easy to set up. The other thing is campuses will often pick the tools, and the library is just one website out of many, many, many websites. So there's not a lot of opportunity to have a say. Like, you can say something, but it's not really going to be like the library is the decision-making entity. For those, probably something to do is just be really aware of those issues and aware of the cognitive dissonance of valuing privacy, but then having tracking going on and even wanting to have statistics. Like, every time we're doing an RFP for any type of platform, you're always looking for statistical reports, right? And that's kind of in tension with privacy. Probably being aware of those things and then trying to set limits, or at least know, well, we have to show stakeholder value, and then that involves violating privacy, but we also value privacy. And thinking that through can help to limit how data is used, or what data is collected and what tools are used. So.
There's a really good bit of research that was done in this area by Marshall Breeding. It was presented, I think it might have been here, or maybe it was in Computers in Libraries a couple of years ago. We'll include a link to it in the slides when we share them. But what's good about it is that he did a really thorough study of library websites. It shows you which libraries are particularly culpable to this, and unsurprisingly, public libraries are. But it's also quite helpful because it lays out how he went about determining, what tracking code was in and the different types of tracking code, like Google and Facebook. So it provides a good framework for you to think about how to assess your own library website. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at that.
And we have our last issue, complex authentication.
So we talked a little bit about this earlier, but essentially, we have multiple authentication methods that we're using as an industry, and we sort of never seem to let them die. We just keep adding new ones. So year by year by year, it gets worse and worse and worse. So we have new ones like federated authentication that can come in lots of flavors, and there's different acronyms associated with them, and a multitude of ways to configure them. And then we have this long list of legacy ones like IP authentication, proxying, referral URL, public library card matching, SIP2. We have some new ones which are regional specific, like Finna API in Finland. And every single one of these has a slightly different flavor. So when you're thinking as a library about what data are we sharing and what risks are our patrons opened up to, you also need to think about what authentication methods you're supporting. And the greater the variety, the more complex it is for your users to understand what's going on. And the reason the skit had that question, like, can you help me? It's a really difficult question to answer. And it's one reason for us as an industry to focus on a very small number of methods. And federated authentication, it's a really great method, but that's a whole another talk. We're going to cut it short here because we wanted to leave some time for questions, and it's coming up to the time.
If you have questions, we have a microphone that will come to you. Just put up your hand.
Please raise your hand to make it easier for Amy to find you.
questions, comments?
Have you seen, and has anyone here come across any of these issues? I mean, it's always really good to hear about practical examples. So, you know, please, yeah, share them.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jane Excel, New York University. And yes, we've encountered many of the issues laid out here, so thank you for this. And I just wanted to go back to the federated authentication, and for us, SSO, shibboleth is what we're using. And I mean, you know, when you ask that question of like, do you know what attributes are being passed? You know, it's like, yes, you know, when I'm setting up those things, you know, I'm telling them like, yeah, here's this attribute and this attribute, but I guess it's not always clear to me, you know, which attributes actually are going to be sensitive, and that our identity management team, which is outside the library, you know, are not necessarily sharing the same concerns that we are. You know, for them, like your university ID is like the most sensitive piece of data because that's what you use to log into like your bursar account or the student health center or whatever. But for them, they're like, yeah, give them their name, their email, whatever, all good, you know. So that's just sort of one comment / question about like dealing with those differences, I guess. And then my second question was when you were just talking about the sort of totally anonymized federated access that you mentioned earlier. I'm wondering how you work with vendors for that, if there's some kind of like breach, you know, if like a student's credentials have been compromised, something like that. Because I mean, right now for us, we pretty much rely on IP addresses to come back and figure out, you know, how did that breach occur, who was at the end of that breach that happened. So I'm unclear how that would sort of work with the vendors to be able to handle that kind of thing. And I mean, last comment is just as far as possible, sort of, we've been kind of hanging on to IP authentication where you do not have to log in, you know, where you can just use your IP and then have an anonymous session wherever possible, so that at least students have the option to, you know, have that kind of access without needing to pass any attributes other than an IP that's associated with the university.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry.
So quickly, do you mind if I go ahead? So you made a really great point about this issue of campus configuration. In my experience, there's a lot of miscommunication between library needs and internal campus IT. So for example, a common one I see is that librarians tend to come from a privacy focus. Campus tends to come from a security focus. The two are not the same at all. And building good relationships with your IT department is critical. Seamless Access did a survey, actually our outreach group organized a survey of how libraries felt about this and how IT felt about this. It's about a year and a half ago. And it revealed that there was really poor communication. A lot of people answered that they might raise this issue less than once a year. And with technology changing the way it is, you know, that's really not good enough. So that's a well understood problem. Your last question, which I remember next, was the one about, and how do you deal with this? Well, contract language. And so the whole reason this working group was set up to look at contract language is that when it comes down, when the rubber hits the road, what do your contracts say about this? And most contracts are completely silent on federated authentication because they were written in a different era. So the templates that have now just been released this week, and again, there's a link on the seamlessaccess.org website, have been prepared in context of a more general library template that is already available in the industry. And it gives you specific language that you can use as the start of a negotiation. But ultimately, as anyone who's been involved in contract negotiations know, the negotiation part is the important part of the phrase. But this gives you a starting point, and those templates allow you to at least begin by saying, look, if you're going to use federated authentication, we want to ensure this. And the language in there governs different scenarios on, you know, do you want to not share anything or do you want to share some things? Your second question, I think I've forgotten, sorry. Tracking data breaches. Well, clearly, if your vendor has a data breach, then the contract you have with them should require them as a minimum to inform you. I mean, these are basic requirements that are in GDPR, for example. I suspect it's the same for the California legal requirements too, that they should be informing you if they're getting personal data and that's being breached. I think contract language is, again, the answer I'd give to that one. How can the vendor figure out what happened, as in how the data got breached? Well, if they if they have a good system, they should be password protecting and minimizing access to the personal data on there. And I think maybe I'm missing the context you're.
No, if it was an IP compromised, you'd say this IP tracks back to like this person, but if it's anonymized, how would you know on campus, if it's on campus or if it's an external actor, who was the one who actually did the breach?
Oh, I see what you mean. So this is where someone's credentials have been hacked at the institution end. Got it. Right. So you can turn off the ability of that pseudonymous ID to be used anymore. So unlike IP authentication, where you block a range of IPs, and those IPs might include proxy IPs, and they shut off all access, with federated authentication, what can happen is that the vendor can say, we've identified unauthorized access through this identifier. We don't know what that identifier is, but they can provide information to you as the library or to the campus to say, this is a problem. You can then look up the credential associated with that in your system, because your system is the one that's providing the attributes that link back to it. So you as the institution can always tell what a pseudonymous or anonymous ID is on your side. It's the vendor that can't tell. So they can give you information, so which is one of the reasons why it's a lot better than IP addresses, because when IP addresses are blocked, it's a really blunt tool. Federated authentication, you can pinpoint a specific login and turn that off. And I'm sorry it took me a while to figure out that was the question.
Okay, I just want to say, I'm at Cornell University. We have a very similar situation with NYU, but with one really big difference, and that is that our primary identity management person in the campus identity management, not in the library, is married to a woman who worked in the e-resources group in the library and cared deeply about privacy, very deeply about privacy. So we have a really good relationship with our campus identity management. I don't think that's something that can be really replicated in other places, which is too bad, but it's great. But we have, with his help, we have reached out to a bunch of different vendors and said, here we have a different profile to use for our Shibboleth SSO login than the standard campus setup. And vendors have been pretty good about, in most cases, about being willing to take that and receiving only, like, we give like 5 different attributes so that we really can have a pseudonymous situation. And it doesn't work with all vendors, and I think that they don't really even need to do that, because if they're members of I can't remember the consortium.
Incommon Federation?
Yeah.
Federation.
Yeah, they could just sort of get it set up without us even being involved. But we can then control what we do actually send to them through our identity management people. So we've had some success with that. And it's something that we hope to write up how we've done it and share with others.
Please do. I'm going to make one quick last comment. Publishers don't understand this either, by the way. I spend more time explaining this to publishers than I do to librarians. It's new to everyone, so bear in mind that when you talk to a publisher about this, if it's a sales or account rep, they probably have minimal knowledge, and some of the staff behind may still be understanding this as well. It's still relatively new technology to a lot of publishers in our industry. Not the really big ones, but many others.
2 things really quickly. We've mentioned seamless access a number of times. We do have the program manager for seamless access who posed as questioner number 1. Hilke Kerr is here in the front, so if you've got seamless access or get FTR questions, you can ask Hilke. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. is the long arm of the law session, and I know that some of the topics that Gary Price and Deborah Caldwell-Stone are going to cover touch on privacy, so if this is something that's important to you, 11 a.m. tomorrow in the Francis Marion. Join that session. And lastly, I would like to thank our speakers and our audience volunteers for participating today, and thank you for sticking with us. Have a great day.